it's amazing how many people actually sit down each year and make a Seder to celebrate, which is probably one of the most controversial events in all of history. And what's even more amazing is how many people sit down to make a Seder who actually are part of the controversy, meaning that they don't believe in it. You know, how many families traditionally sit down to make a Seder that, you just ask them, like, do you believe in Yetzias Mitzrayim? Because if you believe in Yetzias Mitzrayim, then you can more or less have to believe in Kriyas Yam Suf. If you believe in Kriyas Yam Suf, you have to believe in Kabbalah Torah, and Har Sinai, and Torah mitzvahs, and so why aren't you doing them? Why aren't you living, this lifestyle? And that's, so it falls therefore in the category of tradition and hypocrisy, really, in a sense, because it's not necessarily hypocrisy. You can do it as a fun event. The same way, for example, if you have a family simcha, you decide to make it, to spruce it up a bit. So you come up with some kind of skit, grama. People do grama at simchas, basically, where it's based upon truth, but you're having fun. So the Seder is fun for a lot of people, right? You get together. All the truth is, when I was growing up, I found it mostly boring. But the adults find it somewhat fun, I guess. People feel a need, a hemshech, tradition, but at the end of it, you're reading all these different sentences and statements that are being made by the Haggadah. They're really basically, what do you believe? I remember years ago, and I was actually away for Pesach that year, and Mishpacha had an article on Velikovsky, which I think I mentioned before at some point in time. Velikovsky was Emmanuel Velikovsky. He was the Russian scientist who moved there to Israel, I think, in 1948. And he was on sabbatical that year, and he was a secular scientist, and he decided that either Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim is a true story, and then what happened to the world? How did it drop out of the history books? Or it was made up, in which case, I'd like to know. So he actually set out on a investigation to try and find out what the bottom line was. And the results of his investigation was that he found all kinds of evidence that it was true, and he was able to explain historically what had happened. And in fact, there's all kinds of things like hieroglyphics and other things in other different cultures about things that occurred that were all out of sync. In fact, I think by about 600 years, they're out of sync in the end. And he showed how basically, based upon these discrepancies historically, you could line up a lot of the things that cultures were saying about events that took place that year in history with the whole story, including, for example, the sun standing still. There are some cultures where it talks about the sun not setting and the moon not coming out. Some ancient cultures actually record things like that, but no one paid attention to that because it was off by hundreds of years from the story of Yeshua. And likewise by the Haggadah. And he was actually able to match it up, and the scientific world did not like what he came up with. The Epicurus world did not like what they came up with. So basically they went ahead and vilified him, and they even falsified information, and even said things in his name that were not true, just to make him look like a fool. Eventually, most of what they tried to do to him was found out to be true, scientifically, astronomically, as well, because science caught up with his theories eventually. And according to the article that I read, that they say that even Einstein in the beginning did not accept and believe what he was put forward. Towards the end, was forced to agree and admits that these things were true. In fact, the last thing that he read before he died, apparently opened on his desk, was Velikovsky's manuscript or book that Einstein had been looking at just before he passed away. That's what the article said. Yeah.
In what sense do you line them up? Like, if these things are off by several hundred years.
I was hoping you were going to ask for the science behind this, because I forgot the science behind it. But it turns out there were certain astronomical phenomena over the course of the thousands of years that could account for the discrepancy in time. That's all I can tell you right now, because I don't remember exactly. But just, if you want, I'll try and find the article. I'm sure you can certainly get the article. It's not that old. But and I think the truth is, his book Ages and Chaos. Look it up. Ages and Chaos, I think, is the book where he actually explains all this scientifically. He does. He lays the whole thing. But it turns out that history is wrong. But the truth is, that shouldn't surprise us. One of the most remarkable things that I find personally remarkable is that people put so much emphasis on Western dating and Western history, when in fact, the whole thing only started to take shape in terms of any accuracy in the time that what's his name? I can't believe it. Josephus. Mm-hmm. Can't believe I forgot that name. Josephus began to record things. He was actually Jewish, who was hired by the Roman court to keep track of events. But anybody who knows, Western history or Eastern history or biblical history knows that every nation used to fabricate history to suit their beliefs.
They're still doing it.
They're still doing it 100%. Well, the Nazis try to rewrite the history books. The Russians also try to rewrite the history books. Cultures constantly doing it, basically. The Americans don't really need to do it, things like that. But certainly back in those days, and it wasn't considered to be false. It wasn't considered to be fabricated because that was the belief system. It was all a lie in the end. The fact that the Paro claimed to be come from a god, in the end. But and people had to swallow it and believe it. But for the longest time, people did not keep track of time. The first mitzvah that the Jewish people are given is the mitzvah of Kirush HaChodesh. And the reason is because it wasn't simply the mitzvah to sanctify the new moon. It was a mitzvah to keep track of time. That's really what it was in the end. It was a mitzvah to keep track of time. And until that point in time, because Baruch had done it, mankind had not done it. People didn't. They weren't really involved in that.
For agriculture, they didn't track?
The seasons, perhaps, but not the years and the dates, the months, things like that, and recording historical events, what happened because there was also another problem. The people didn't even know what was going on in other cultures, So it wasn't like today where you could everything happens instantaneously. Everyone knows about it. You can't falsify it so much because the whole world knows about it overnight. And look at the Arab states and how much history basically is falsified, and people are built up and things are played down because of the fact. You just go look at how the Arabs portrayed the wars they lost to the Israelis and what happened. You can lose a war and still win the war. It's the most remarkable thing of all. How you can basically get beaten so badly and somehow recorded in your history books as you actually won. Somehow, yeah. So, the point is that the fact that Yitzis Mitzrayim, which happened like 3,320 years ago, or even longer at this point in time, that the history books are not accurate portraying it at the beginning. Although Josephus writes in his time that people knew a nation left Egypt forcefully. He writes it in his book. He writes in his time you could still go and see the pillar of salt Lot's wife turned into at that time. Just go back and read Josephus. It's amazing. But people didn't care. People don't pay attention. And for the most part, people don't. It doesn't affect their lives. They don't really feel the need for it. Today, for sure, people are totally detached from history. The average child, the average, even adult, for that matter, doesn't really feel the need to be connected because it's all the here and now. Technology and the modern world just makes us all focus on the here and now because there's so much competition to succeed. The quality of life has gone down tremendously. People are so involved in trivial things and material pursuits to such a degree that they define themselves by which cell phone you have defines you to some degree, and how much time you spend on your cell phone defines which kind of car you drive and the house you live in. When you have such a focus on material comforts as a way of life, there's no time for the past. Life becomes too distracting. And that's Amalek's, one of the devices he uses to cut the Jewish people off. So as a result of that, you have so many Jews today who are totally detached from tradition, yet they sit down and they make a Seder. You just want to walk in their front door and say, "What are you doing? What are you doing? Why are you doing this right now? Right? We're making a Seder. Why making a Seder? Because that's my father did. Why did your father do it? Right? Someone down the line believed. The reason why he did it was because he believed, and there was a mitzvah, and he was commemorating. But what are you doing it for? Just for the sake of family tradition? That's what families do. Well, the Gentile world, they sit down, they have turkeys on Thanksgiving. So we make a Pesach Seder. Unfortunately, it tends to overlap with the Stanley Cup playoffs, but that's a shkacha pratis. There's ways you can get both in. There's ways to get both in. Especially now with timers and video things like that and sneak preview. But what does it mean to us? And in a sense, this is what the Rasha is asking. That's the most important part of the entire Haggadah. We sort of gloss over that. There's the Chacham, right? We all identify with the Chacham. He's the good guy. He's the good kid. He's the kid that everybody wants, right? The Tam, Eino Yideli Shol. It's like they're connected somehow, but they're trivial. They're like the young kids still growing up. You have to pay attention, mechanech them, but on the other hand, they're not really contributing that much. You're giving to them in a sense, right? It's the Stanley Cup playoffs between the Rasha and the Chacham, right? This is Seder night in Canada. Right, or what do they call it these days? It's used to be called hockey night in Canada when I was growing up. But this is the real match. The Chacham versus the Rasha, and the Rasha is so bad we break his teeth, and we make the most phenomenal statement to him. Breaking his teeth, I understand. I mean, not physically breaking his teeth, but criticizing him, giving him musr, putting him in his place. Who wouldn't do a thing like that? At the Seder, one of your siblings get up, someone in the family gets up and starts making complaints like that and accusations like that. You're going to say something. You're going to give some kind of musr and try to put things in perspective for this person. But to go ahead and make the following statement, this is very powerful, very powerful. The Haggadah is giving you an extremely important message. Like so many things in Yiddishkeit, the emphasis is in the wrong place. Chazal put the emphasis in the right place. We tend to put the emphasis in the wrong place because the way you look at the world will determine what you emphasize, right? So we've grown up with Hollywood over the last little while, or Hollywood, attitude towards life, where the good guy, he starts off, as the underdog, and he fights his way up, and he becomes the good, the hero, and defeats the bad guy. The bad guy's gone, and there's nothing about the bad guy who we identify with. If someone says, they watch Star Wars. Imagine going to Star Wars with a friend. You did things like that. You're walking out, you're smiling, having a good time. It's a great movie, and your friend turns and says to you, that Darth Vader, I really like him. I really identify with him. I can see where he's coming from. The whole thing. Chaval Yetshuv in the end. It's like, what do you mean? What are you talking about? It's like Luke Skywalker. And here I'm giving away my past. It's like Luke Skywalker is like he's the good guy, and it's like he's the religious guy. He's the guy wearing white, although he wears black at the end, right? Which is significant, by the way. Very significant. There's a lot of symbolism in these movies, whether it's planned or not planned. There's a lot of movies that are built upon this idea of good versus evil. And unfortunately, historically, just look at the Gemara Yerushalmi today about the Mishnah in Chelek talks about the four kings, the three kings that don't go to Olam Haba, the four Hedyot that don't go to Olam Haba, and the whole story of Menashe goes back and forth. And Menashe was a Rasha, came back into Tshuva. It's an awesome story. For 33 years, he took Chizkiah's work and undid it. And then he became a total Rasha and turned the entire nation to Avodah Zarah. And then the last year he does Tshuva. And the Malachim, the Gemara says, Malachim closed the windows on his Tshuva. They don't want his Tshuva to go to Shemayim. So Kadosh Baruch Hu says, if I close the door on Menashe, I close the door on Al Bali Tshuva in the end. So Gemara says, Kadosh Baruch Hu digs a little tunnel, whatever that means, underneath the Kisei HaKavod, to leave room for people like Menashe to somehow find their way to do tshuva. What do we need stories like this for? What is this supposed to mean? And it's such a flip-flop case of Kadosh Baruch Hu. The Malachim are saying, come on, okay, he's doing tshuva, but someone who's so bad at such terrible things, how is it possible to let him back into the circle once again? Kadosh Baruch Hu says, yeah, I know, but he's doing tshuva, and I got the soft spot for tshuva, even though he's a terrible Rasha. The story of Yeravam, the Gemara in Sanhedrin says, that was the Yerushalmi Sanhedrin, this is the Bavli Sanhedrin, where it talks about how Kadosh Baruch Hu in the end of days, or in the Olam Haba, will talk to Yeravam and say, why don't the three of us, you, me, and Ben Yishai, go for a walk together in Gan Eden? And Yeravam says, who goes first? So Kadosh Baruch Hu says, Ben Yishai, of course. He said, well, I don't want it in the end. He's like, so what? It's like, what kind of story? What's he doing in the Olam Haba in the first place? How did he get there? How does this discussion take place? How does Kadosh Baruch Hu make such an offer to him? What's the story behind the story here? The Rasha says, Ma ha'avodas azos lechem. What does this avodah mean to you? What does it mean to you? What's he asking on a pshat level? We have to go through pshat, Rambam's Drush and Sod over here. What's the pshat level? The pshat level is that basically, a long time ago, we were told our forefathers were in Mitzrayim, and they were of the Avodah Zarah, as the Medrash tells us, and they were holding a Memta Shari Tumah, and the first stage, the Geula, was to get them to break away from Avodah Zarah. And since a lamb was one of the things that the Egyptians worship, the Jewish people had to prove that they were brave enough to stand aside, apart from the Mitzrayim, and walk through the streets with the God of the Mitzrayim to sacrifice it. The Mitzrayim certainly knew where it was going in the end, and still do that. That showed that they could make the break psychologically, emotionally, and they're prepared for Geula. And Shabbos Haggadah was because they did it on Shabbos that day, and the Egyptians couldn't do anything against them in the end, right? But that was the break. But today, says the Rasha, right? Who worships lambs? That we certainly don't. If there's somebody out in the world right now, maybe cows, right? In India, people worship cows, but very few Jews go for that, right? We like to eat them instead, right? Who worships lamps? Who worships animals amongst the Jewish people? Where is that a break? Why do I have to go through this entire procedure that at one point meant something, today doesn't mean anything at all because it's not what the Jewish people are holding at this stage of the game? That's Pshat level. Right? What's the Remez level? Right? The Remez level, he's basically saying that, you're all a bunch of hypocrites in the end. What does it mean to you? I mean, really, look at your lifestyles. Look at the way you live. Are you consistent with the Haggadah? Now you sit there and make every year you make a Seder and go through all the motions, right? But you take it apart, ask yourself, what does this mean in everyday life? Right? Before you start criticizing me, take a look at yourself. The Gemara says, on a drush level, says the base of Levi, that he's really asking the question, Ma havas lechem lo lo. What's lo lo? So lo lo means on a pshat level to him. But the base of Levi says lo lo means to Kosh Baruch Hu. Because what does this? What does it mean to you, but not to him? Because it means nothing to him in the Yibam. You, it's important, right? Because whatever reason, you like barbecues, commemorate events long gone, remember the good old days, Kosh Baruch Hu, the big miracles today, you're financially strapped, this problem, that problem, those Kosh Baruch Hu saved us, right? But today, to Kosh Baruch Hu, he doesn't need your karbonos anymore. So this is the basis really of Reform and conservative Judaism, that Judaism changes with the times, that the mitzvahs are only relevant based upon the needs of the day. So therefore, if today there's nothing meaningful about sacrifice of Korban Pesach, it means Korban Pesach is no longer valid at all. The whole mitzvah disappears. Not that I can't perform the actual act, but the actual mitzvah itself completely becomes uprooted. Because mitzvahs are as money as they're for set times. That's what the Rasha is implying. Because Baruch Hu would agree today this mitzvah is no longer necessary. If you want to do it, that's your business. I don't have to interfere in your lifestyle. It's not for me to say don't do it anymore. Although today a lot of people would actually go that far and actually say don't do it because of animal rights and this thing, that situation, whatever the case may be, right? Or you're making smoke bones in my backyard. I don't want the smoke for whatever reason. But for the most part, he's not saying don't do it. He's just saying don't include me and don't make it appear that if I'm not involved, I'm excluded. That's on a drush level, right? What's a sod level over here? So that we'll have to see. That's the important part over here. What's he actually saying? So his question is applicable to everybody. We break his teeth, because the Haggadah is assuming you're already on the same page as the Haggadah. But the question is, are you really? And how much of the Rasha is in you too? What does that mean? I don't quite. I make the Seder. I clean for Pesach. I do everything I'm supposed to do. I spend hundreds of shekels on matzahs and maror and things like that. I go through the whole thing. I drive myself until I'm almost neurotic, getting rid of all the chumitz. Right? What kind of statement is that? I'm not reformed. You're not considered a Jew. What are you asking me over here? Well, there's doing the mitzvahs per se on a technical, mechanical level. There's living according to the spirit of what those mitzvahs mean, what the Haggadah is actually saying. Right? What the Haggadah is trying to bring out in me and bring out in the world and bring out in the Jewish people. Are you aware of that? How many people even prepare the Haggadah? I remember when I was younger, today I try and do it by learning the Gemara and giving shirim on the whole thing, but there was a time way back when I was way younger, I used to every year take a different Haggadah and start 30 days in advance, every single day learn the Haggadah. Another piece. A different pshat, a different mahalach, different mafarish on the Haggadah. Every year I take a different one and learn 30 days in advance, every single day. By the time it came time for the Seder, I was ready. I was prepared. Today, life is so fast and so busy with that. But it was like, so in the end, a lot of the message gets lost. But you have to focus. Because the Haggadah is what Klal Yisrael is all about. It's an amazing thing. Because Sod tells us that every light, for the most part, that you want to have access to, you have to earn it. You have to do something to bring it down. On Rosh Hashanah, you have to daven. You have to be in shul. You have to do this, simani. You have to do various different acts, specifically, that will draw the light to you. You don't do it, you don't get the light. That's just the way it is, right? Yom Kippur, same thing. Shabbos every week, also Shabbos, if you don't, as the Gemara says, you don't prepare on Shabbos, you don't eat on Shabbos. If you're not ready for Shabbos, you're not focused on what Shabbos has to give you, and you're working to bring that Kedusha to you, you're not going to get it. Every Chag of the year, the light comes to you if you work to bring it to you. Now, fortunately, most of what you have to do is kef, is enjoyable. We don't mind, sitting down to Suda, getting dressed up, cleaning the house up, lighting the candles, having guests, singing zmiras, giving the Torah, eating lechavot Shabbos kodesh. It's not such a hard, ordeal over here. It's a pretty pleasant thing. But you have to have the proper kavanah. And you have to go through the motions to do it. Otherwise, forget it. People who run on the beach on Shabbos, there's no such thing as Shabbos whatsoever, and do malacha, they're not going to get the light. It's just the way it is. There's only one day of the entire year where the light comes down for free. You don't have to do anything to warrant that light, to deserve that light. Only one time of the year, Leil Seder. When 3 stars come out until Chatzot, the light of Geula comes down every year, no matter what you're doing, and is there for you no matter where you're holding. Which is a curious thing. Why? Because of all the chagim that we have to do something and focus on something. Rosh Hashanah, you're done for an hour and a half, married, you come home, simanim, you have a wonderful student, you go to sleep. Maybe there's some mishnayos, whatever. It depends on your schedule. But that's it. Yom Kippur, same thing. You daven, you come home, right, and you go to sleep. There's not much to do on Yom Kippur except the daven for itself. You also daven on Leil Seder. There's no difference over here. It's also long because of how they inserted it as well, right? But you come home and you make a Seder. And the longer it goes, the more meshubach you are. And we learn about Gedolim who go the entire night. And all these different parts and portions, and the Shulchan Aruch and the Matzah, it's like incredible, all these different details that go into it. If the light is free, what am I doing? What am I doing? You're just making sure you're in the right place at the right time to receive it. Someone can tell you, I'm dropping off $100,000 at your door today. What do I have to do to get it? Nothing. Just be home. Just be home. What's coming? I'm not sure. Right? Just be home. If you're not there, when the courier comes, he has strict instructions to go and bring back the money. All you have to do is be there to open the door. Right? You won't even go to the bathroom. Right? You won't even get a drink from the fridge. You will sit there by that door the entire time. Chas v'chalila. Something will happen. You've got to get a drink and the fan of the fridge goes on, and you cannot hear, right, the door being knocked on because he knocks too softly, and I was like, I missed. You will sit outside the door, in front. It could be cold and snowing. You'll still sit with your parka because you don't want to miss an opportunity. It's free, but you have to be there to open the door. On Leil Seder, the light is free, but you have to be there to open the door. So Chazal said, we're going to make sure that whatever happens in Leil Seder, you're doing nothing else but being there. Just being there. Every single detail is about being there to mekabel and receive that light. It's free. You're not doing the Haggadah to be able to draw it down. It's coming down anyhow. You're doing the Haggadah to draw it to you. To bring it to you should be there, available, should change you. What's changing? What's changing? Right? What's the focus? What am I supposed to be doing? Ma avos lachem. What? This is the whole Haggadah summed up in one statement, and not from the Chacham, from the Rasha. What? Because a lot of times you can figure out. You ever notice how the enemy sometimes understands us better than we understand ourselves? Right? Hitler in Machshma v'Zichro is quoted as saying, "You have all these secular Jews who don't believe in our history and don't believe in our destiny. Orthodox Jews who also act as if it's not so true. They're just keeping the flame alive for whatever reason." And Hitler comes out, Yemach Shmo makes a statement. He says, when I look back on this long history of this tiny little nation, like Mark Twain's quote, where he talks about the Jewish people and what are we still doing here? I mean, he more or less has an answer to something else, to the question to some degree. But Hitler says, I look back and I wonder, I can't help but wonder that maybe destiny has really chosen this nation above other nations. Because why else? How can you possibly explain the longevity? He says in typical Amaleki fashion, however, just in case, I'll take one last shot to destroy them on behalf of mankind. But he noted it. He saw it. The enemies see things, because when someone's an enemy of you, you make a point of understanding him. He may like you, but if you don't like him, you notice everything about him. Right? I daven next to people in shul sometimes who their manners, their habits, what they do, it distracts you, and you just become aware of it. right? They don't pay attention to you. They don't care who you are. They have no idea what you're doing because they don't have the same mannerisms, hopefully. But you pay attention. They're not the enemy, but you pay attention. When somebody gets in your nerves, if someone bothers you, and it can come if you hate them, and they totally uproot your way of living, you will know them backwards and forwards. You will study them and understand them. So when the Rasha says and asks the question, see, everybody else is taking it for granted. The Chacham is taking it for granted, and the end of the show is taking it for granted, and the Tam is taking it because he's just like there. He's like just showing up and being part of the experience of being here. But the Rasha, who's always looking for a way out, always looking for to tear down, it's like you're strategizing the entire time. So he sums the entire thing up, and he says, what does avoda mean to you in the end? In his question, right, is a question that all of us have to ask ourselves each year. In fact, I would suggest before you start the Haggadah with your families, just ask this question: what does this avoda mean to you? So when you get to the question itself in the Haggadah itself, you already have the answer. The answer is in the Haggadah. The truth is the answer is not really directly in the Haggadah. The answer is the Haggadah itself. The Haggadah itself actually ends up being the answer. The entire experience is why you can't leave anything out, which is why you have to take the entire thing seriously from beginning until end. Because every part of it's an aspect of it. The question is, what's the answer in the end? So, it's very simple, but it's also very profound. And every part of the Haggadah is set up and designed to bring this about. It's all about this one idea. HaKadosh Baruch Hu asked Adam HaRishon to name himself. He finished naming all the animals. All the animals now had names. The Torah says what he called them, that was their name. Of course, that's what he called them. What else would they be? So of course the answer is because he was able to understand the essence of what he was looking at. So therefore, whatever name he gave them was in fact a description of their essence. So, Kosh Baruch Hu said, now having named the animals, give yourself a name. What will you call yourself? So he called himself Adam. Right? And Kosh Baruch Hu said, why? And he said, because first of all, so I'll never forget I came from the Adamah. I'll always be a humble person. No, I came from the dirt. At least my physical component came from the dirt. But more importantly, it will always remind me that I'm a tziruf of two opposite components. The physical body, summed up by the word blood, dam, right, daled mem, and the aleph, which symbolizes the neshama. I always want to remember that I am a balance between these two things. Now, if you look at the Ramchal, Derech Hashem, he talks about, he talks about the tachlis of Ma'aseh Bereshis, he talks about Kosh Baruch Hu, talks about Adam, right? And it begins by saying that Adam is made perfectly balanced. In the beginning, there was no internal Yetzer Hara. There was only and there wasn't even the Nachash, quite honestly, according to the Zohar, the Rizal, that the Nachash only came into the Garden of Eden after Adam HaRishon ate from the, or at least he looked at the eighth dust Tov Hara. But until that time, he was chutz the gan. Adam brought him in through his actions. But even after he brought him in through his actions, there was no internal Yetzer Hara. The internal Yetzer Hara only came about because Adam procreated before Chava was tahor from the interaction with the Nachash. Cain was created from that interaction. Now man was made with an internal Yetzer Hara. And also there was a retroactive effect on Adam HaRishon that he also absorbed some of the Nachash into him. As the Zohar points out, it came into the left leg for various different reasons, right? But it became a part of him. Once it became a part of him, says the Ramchal, it changed everything. The perfect balance of man was gone. Yeah.
Wasn't it over the course of 130 years he got rid of that tumah? So
not the Nachash. He got rid of the Zuhat, but some of the Tumah, and rectified from him within himself to make a sheis after that, but not the internal Yetzer Hara. That remained with him from that point onward. The only way from that point on to rectify to get rid of the Yetzer Hara was to die. And to be recreated anew. Because even Gilgulim doesn't do it. Gilgulim brings it back in Neshama. A person comes back in a goof with the Yetzer Hara, but only to Chis and Meis. The truth is, Yemos and Mashiach, Kosh Baruch Hu was shecht the Yetzer Hara. That's when it's finally over at that point in time. Mm-hmm. But that's when he absorbed the Yetzer Hara, and says Ramachal, at that point in time, man became imbalanced. Whatever evil existed in creation was increased, and no longer was man able to cope with it. In fact, the Gemara goes one step further and says that nobody can cope with the evil Yetzer Hara. We're all basically sitting ducks when it comes to Yetzer Hara. So what are we supposed to do in the end? So Gemara says, you have to mispal to Kosh Baruch Hu. If Kosh Baruch Hu doesn't help us, we can't succeed. So every success, and I saw also in the Gemara yesterday, every success, this morning, every success a person has with the Yetzer Hara is the Siyata D'Shmaya. It's siyata d'shmar. If you succeed, and the Gemara says, for example, if a person tries to overcome a bad habit the first time, the second, the third time, Kodesh Baruch Hu will eventually remove it from his life, take it from him. But in the meantime, if your intention is to overcome it, Kodesh Baruch Hu will help you. But the point is that once Adam absorbed the Yetzer Hara within him, the balance between the Guf and the Neshama became imbalanced. From that point onward, and man basically was Raminu Rav. He was evil from his youth, from his birth really, because all of creation descended into the makam of the klipos, of the chitzonim, which means we're being born. We're being born into a bad neighborhood. We're growing up and living in a bad neighborhood. We don't have a fighting chance, basically. The only way to survive, and you don't see the same way that they do in a broken down, dilapidated neighborhood where you can see what's going on, all the drug dealers, things like that. But on a spiritual level, it's the same idea, the same thing. So then what does that mean, technically speaking? So it means when Adam and Rishon had defined themselves, Adam with Aleph and Dalet Mem, no longer are they in balance. In fact, if anything, the Dalet Mem became larger, bigger, and the Aleph became de-emphasized, became smaller. So that's why Kodesh Baruch Hu says, he says that Yad al Keiska, right? My hand is on my throne as an oath against Amalek. I will be at war against Amalek forever and will destroy him. As Rashi points out, why is the Aleph missing from the word case? It should be kisei, because as long as Amalek exists, then my kisei will not be complete. The Aleph will be missing, because the demus of Adam is on the kisei. And as long as man can't be an Adam, the kisei is not complete. So what's missing from the man to make him an Adam is the Aleph. And that's why Aleph is also added to Vayikra. To make Vayikar into Vayikra, as Rashi points out, the Aleph again, basically representing that aspect of man that allows him to connect to Kodesh Baruch Hu in such a way that he can talk to Hashem, and everything seems like hashgacha pratis, as opposed to simply random, circumstances, things unfolding in an evolutionary type way. That Aleph represents that idea of Adam. So anybody, by definition, and it's remarkable because we see that to be a human and to be an Adam can be two different things. They should be the same thing, but they can be two different things. So someone can be brilliant. He can be a brilliant scientist, physicist, doctor, astronomer, psychologist. He can be totally brilliant in his field. But if he doesn't believe in God, if he's not connected, if he has any sfeikus whatsoever, because Baruch Hu, his Aleph is small. He's just Daled Mem. And as we said before several times, and it's a point that's always worth repeating, that's why the first Makkah in Mitzrayim is Makkah's Dam. Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu had to tell the Jewish people where they were starting from. We are about to turn the whole thing around. Really, it shouldn't have happened. Really, we should have been allowed to become extinct. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu min havtacha to Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. HaKadosh Baruch Hu would bring us back to Israel in the 14th generation, which means HaKadosh Baruch Hu at some point in time had to turn the whole thing around and reverse the process. And the starting point was taking the Dam and adding the Aleph. So every Makkah was a refuah. Every plague that HaKadosh Baruch Hu brought against the Mitzrayim was for one reason and one reason only. And this is what the Haggadah is all about. The whole Seder is about this. Your whole life is about this. The entire history of mankind is about this. That's why the Makkahs correspond to the Maimers of Ma'aseh Bereishis. That's why there's a correlation. Just aside from the fact there's 10 and 10 and 10. So all 10s are connected, right? And 10 spheres. But why specifically connect them to the 10 Maimers of Kodesh Baruch Hu used to make Ma'aseh Bereishis? Because this is, according to Kabbalah, the recreation. In fact, it's considered to be a second Ma'aseh Bereishis, the 10 Makkahs taking place in Mitzrayim. Kodesh Baruch Hu is mechadish Ma'aseh Bereishis in Mitzrayim. And the Jewish people are the new birth of mankind, or supposed to be in the end. So then what were the Makkahs all about? It wasn't about the Mitzrayim. We're all going out cheering, going, yeah, another Makkah, the Makkah's dumb. We're thinking to ourselves, and all the Khartoumim come out and say, that's no problem, watch this. They turn the rest of the water to blood. Great, fantastic, right? This guy causes a plague, this guy comes along and says, that's not, we can also make plague too, and it makes the rest of the people get the plague. Hello? It's like, take it away. Take it away from the people who have it. The fact that you can duplicate the Makkah whatever water was left over, because you just imagine all the Mitzrayim were thirsty with nothing to drink. The stores are empty. There's no bottles of water you can get anywhere because they're all blood. But there's a whole department store of bottles left over, right? So to prove their point, the Chartumim go in and turn those bottles of water into blood too. It's a brilliant strategy, no? Right? It's amazing how far people go to cut off their noses to spite their face in the end. So we're all going, what a disappointment. The blood impressed me, didn't impress them. Just like the stick falling on the ground, right, and becoming a snake, and then going back and becoming a stick and swallowing all the other snakes in the end, right? But no one's moved by that. The Mitzrayim aren't moved by that. We're impressed. That would impress me, right? But they're not, because they're all magicians over there. All the kids during recess, Hafsakah, did magic tricks, right? We did that one last week at Hafsakah. We can do that also, right? We got some even bigger sticks with bigger snakes. So what's the point? Why would Akash Baruch Hu set up a situation like that would become humiliating for Moshe Rabbeinu? Was Moshe humiliated by this? He's having fun. He's having fun. First of all, he knows what's coming. So it's a little bit easier to do what you're doing over here, right? What? He knows what's coming. Oh, he knows what the rest of the story is all about. So it's okay. Enjoy yourselves right now, right? What's coming up a little bit later on, you'll be coming to me, and I'll be a big guy in your eyes later on. You just hang in there for the timing. So I can afford to take my time over here. Makkah's done. So finally, by Makkah's Kinim, right? The frogs also, they made a big barbecue, right? That's what they did. They made a big barbecue. They fed all these frogs, right, hanging around. That's why later on by Arov, which Baruch Hu gets rid of them all, because he doesn't want them keeping the skins and benefiting anymore, because the time of benefiting is over, right? But they made a big barbecue. They're all bothered by all the frogs. It's amazing. I had a reaction to antibiotics about 2 months ago. I forgot that I had one before, or actually wasn't sure it was from antibiotics. Apparently, you can develop these things over time. When I was younger, penicillin was an issue. They always ask you, "Would you take penicillin?" No. So I took antibiotics. Of course, I had an allergic reaction. It was terrible. It was like a skin reaction. The itching was unbelievable. Before I took an antihistamine I'm not supposed to take, right? And I'm telling you, I couldn't sleep. I was like scratching the skin off my. I couldn't tell what was worse, whether it was worse to have the itching or what my skin felt like after all the scratching, which basically it was terrible. My kids were having a great time because I looked like a gorilla, just like all this. Doing it, and I tell you, there's 2 times I thought of jumping from a high location. One was when I had the root canal didn't work and it got infected and all of that. The pain was unbelievable. I was eating anything and I was chewing on anything in sight. And I would chew on socks, whatever I would, just to get rid of the pain. It wouldn't work. I took 6 Tylenols and a glass of scotch to try and kill the pain within 15 minutes. Right? I thought, if this doesn't kill me, that's going to kill me in the end. Another 2, I still survived that. The second thing was this itching, which is incredible, and on Shabbos, which is even worse, it happened, right? You can't do much about it. And I'll tell you, just like you start to lose your sense of, sanity after a while, and then it goes away. And then it's gone. And you totally forget about it. You remember how bad it was, and you're grateful when it first goes away. But it's amazing how fast you can forget the impact and go about your life like it never happened in the end. Not to take penicillin anymore and has such a reaction. That much you can recall. But it's amazing how when the moment the bad is over, the situation is over, you can have terrible financial stress, but you solve it, within 2-3 months you forget about it. Emotion, it's over. The Egyptians, now they're bothered by these frogs, and it's it's everywhere you can possibly imagine, including Paro's bed, and in the closets, and the bathrooms, and the ovens, and it's everywhere. It's driving them crazy. And then Moshe says, enough. And they stop. They're making a barbecue. That's it. They forget all the sewers. You can't go anymore. So we're all thinking to ourselves, so what's the point? And then comes Kinim. So finally by Kinim they go, Ze Etzbe Elokim. But we're all going, what do you mean Ze Yad Elokim? This is the hand of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's the fist. The gruff, it's like, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The finger, it's all you can say is the finger over here. And Makkah after Makkah. So finally by the boils, it's like the Egyptians are getting it, but good. But they're still not, acquiescing. They're still not giving in yet. So we're thinking to ourselves, is this a failure? So HaKadosh Baruch Hu told Moshe Rabbeinu in the very beginning that anyhow, only by Makkah's Bechoros will Paro finally let you go out of Mitzrayim. So then what's the point in the end? Failure? The first plague fail? The second plague fail? No. Not even a little bit. Because none of those plagues were ever for the Mitzrayim. None of them were about destroying Egypt. They happened to destroy Egypt along the way, but that wasn't the tafkid. Because you know something? Because Baruch Hu could destroy Egypt just 1 second. Like Makas Bechoros. Makas Bechoros destroys everything. Okay, so the barad and the hail and all that. It's all you see because Baruch Hu doing increments. He can do it all at one time. He can do it piecemeal, right? But it wasn't about destroying the Mitzrayim or the Egyptians, or that would have happened the first time, the first day. You're freeing people. What difference does it make, right? You don't go to a jail cell of somebody who's in jail getting out and say, 9 months from now you're getting out. And you come back another day and say, 8 months from now you're coming back. You're getting out. It's painful. You wait at the time he has to get out. You say, you open the door, he goes out on that day. So why prolong the entire thing? Because it was about one thing and one thing only. The Jewish people didn't have an aleph. What does it mean not to have an aleph? Well, that's why Makkah is done. You become mem teshar tumah. We know the terminology. We know what is actually taking place. We understand, I forgot to mention the question, but really I started to allude to it, but the statement that I had to add before was fine, we break his teeth. But why do we tell him, had you been there, you wouldn't have got out? How do you know? How can you make a statement like that? Are you just thinking it's a revenge over here? It's like you want to hurt his feelings, say, not only that, but he wouldn't even be part of the Jewish people in the end. Because don't forget, 4/5 of the Jewish people, that's what we're saying to him. We're saying to him, had you been there in Mitzrayim, you would have been Bnei Abraham, Yitzchak and Yaakov. That's fine, because you're part of that line. But you would have been part of the 4/5 who got stuck in Mitzrayim. For asking that question, for thinking that way, you would have been part of the 4/5 stuck in Mitzrayim who died in Makas Choshech. That's what he's saying. That's what we're answering back. How do you know? Because obviously, the difference between the 4/5 and the 1/5 is the very point over here. What's the difference? What happened? What changed? Well, the 1/5 also had problems. They weren't so set on going either for that matter. But there was enough of them, enough of a vision. Because Baruch Hu was Magali himself on Makas Bechoros. That was the crowning achievement of the entire experience. Even Makas Bechoros itself was not so much about destroying the Mitzrayim as much as revealing a Kosh Baruch Hu. The reason why they had to die by Makas Choshech, because by Makas Bechoros there was no Bechir anymore. What's a Kosh Baruch Hu doing? He's Magali himself a bit more. Magali himself when it comes to the Jewish people, there's always 4 groups, primarily. 4 groups. Moshe goes to Mitzrayim, and he says to the Jewish people, I've come in the name of God. Ekia. That's his name. And, they're all listening and saying, okay, right, what's the password? Pekanati. He remembers what Yosef said. Okay, so fine, okay. So maybe you are the Redeemer, maybe you're not. Let's see what happens. They all go out to test, see if you can actually follow through. So by the time they got to Paro's palace, nobody really remained. It was just Moshe and Aaron who went in. They all stood behind them. There's a kedim, but by the time they got to the palace, they all dropped off. They were afraid. They were concerned. They didn't quite. They weren't such mind-meaning. But there were some who were. There were some who were and some who believed, and they went with Moshe Rabbeinu off the bat. You're the Redeemer. You came, Shem Ekia. You know the password. You're bold enough, strong enough to go in there, right? We believe you. And they go with Moshe Rabbeinu. Very, very, very small group of people. Very small, right? Almost insignificant at this point in time. The scholar is tremendous. At the end of the day, it's not about redemption. At the end of the day, it's not about leaving Mitzrayim. That's more of a process. At the end of the day, as the Ramchal points out, as Hashkafa points out, we're here to get to the world to come. And the world to come, the currency is your schuyot. And schuyot are based upon how many times you see a Kosh Baruch Hu in your life and respond accordingly. That's why Yom HaDin, Kosh Baruch Hu is a Ni Hashem. Yosef is a Ni Yosef. He's Magali himself, and they all can't believe what they see. So Kosh Baruch Hu will say, Ani Hashem, and we'll all be blown away. What does Ani Hashem mean? Ani Hashem mean? It means that Kosh Baruch Hu is revealed to you everywhere and every moment in your life. He was talking to you, he was trying to get your attention, he was trying to direct you, and you kept being blinded by the externalities. It was the postman talking to you. God was talking to the postman, but you saw a postman. You were in a store. Right? And someone said something to you in the aisle that was profound, but it was a neighbor, so it was just a neighbor. I talk to the neighbor all the time. This guy's Baruch talking to you through this person. It was an event that took place. Hashgacha pratis. Doesn't it drive you nuts when people like say, "Oh, hashgacha pratis"? You have this hashgacha pratis, right? They say this is hashgacha pratis, that's hashgacha, and they find hashgacha pratis in everything. Doesn't it drive you nuts? Well, it shouldn't, because that's what you're supposed to do. That's the way you're supposed to behave. All the time. Everything is an ongoing dialogue between the Kodesh Baruch Hu and the Jewish people. And you have to be proud. Why can't I hear Hashem? If a Kodesh Baruch Hu is there, says the philosopher, says the psychiatrist, says the scientist, the physicist, this astronomer, if he's there, why can't I hear it? Well, do you ever ask questions like, why can't my tape player play music if it's off? Right? When was the last time you left it off and said, why isn't that playing? Because it's off. Well, if it's off, it can't play. I'll turn it on in the end, right? Why can't I get good reception? Why is there no klita? Well, there's no tower over here. We ask, you hear people in the bus, right? That goes off for a second. There's no klita over here. People go, why is there no klita over here? Because no tower. So why is there no tower? It's a different story, okay? But there's obviously no klita because there's no transmission, right? The radio can't play. There's no electricity in the end. You can't hear Kodesh Baruch Hu if your aleph is small. The gematria of Adam is Geula. Aleph, Dalet, Mem. You don't go into Geula, you find yourself there. Geula is a de facto mamela process. You just happen to be there. Look what happens in the end. The Jewish people are leaving Mitzrayim, and in the beginning they can't go anywhere. They have taskmasters who tell them what to do, when to breathe, how to eat, every single thing. At the end of the redemption process, they kick them out. The strongest nation in the world throws them out against their will. Kulana Mesi, we're all dead people. Can't you see part of what's going on? Throw them out. Without even time to make tzedel derech in the end. That's Geula. That's the real Geula. If you have to pursue it, you have to build it and try and bring it about, like militarily, for example. That's why the IDF hasn't been successful yet. Yeah, 1948 was meant to be a Chat Geula. No question about it. Look at what Kodesh Baruch Hu's done in this country in 70 years. This is all part of the Geula process. There's no denying it. We are in a Geula state, but the last stage is not happening. The last stage isn't happening. We just can't carry through. Mashiach comes and ends the anti-Semitism and stops the nations away. Just why is it? Why can't we get across that threshold? I get phone calls from people. New, right? When's he coming? When's he coming? Face already. My schedule was here five years ago already. And I was like, what's going on? Why can't we cross that threshold? Because we're doing it the wrong way. We're trying to push Geula onto ourselves in the world. We're trying to militarily bring it about. It's not going to happen that way. Geula is the de facto process that happens the moment that the Aleph, Dalet, and Mem come together in a person, and on a national level comes together in a nation. When the Dalet and Mem is no longer the priority. The Aleph, as long as the Jewish people, we have Shmira here, and we have Hatzlacha here, and we're leaders in the world right now, as the articles keep coming out in the Jerusalem Post. We are bringing technology and know-how to the rest of the world. We're called a startup nation. Things happen here in Maraxel, Teva, but we're just not getting that Geula part because the Aleph remains small. Yeah.
Why Teshtalus is appropriate for Geula?
So that's what the Haggadah comes to teach us. Right? That's what the Haggadah comes to teach us. We're not going to go through all the parts. I thought I would go through most of the parts today, but we'll just take two examples from the Haggadah. Right? First of all, it begins with the whole concept of Seder itself. I call it a Seder is an unusual name. Again, over time, the first time we called it a Seder, and somebody said, what are we going to call it? A Seder. Well, that's an interesting name. Right? That's really weird. Why call it a Seder? What is it called feast or Thanksgiving or something like that, which is more appropriate, more normal. Why call it Seder? Right? Today it's called a Seder. Who thinks about the word Seder anymore? That's what it's called. It's called a Seder. Why is it called Seder? We stand up. It's the only holiday we stand there and actually sing the table of contents. When was the last time you ever sang the table of contents of anything in the end? You barely even look at that. Once in a while you may go back, but we actually go through the entire, the whole thing from beginning until end, and we praise the kids for that. And when was the last time children were the central focus of anything? Okay, Shabbos they bring up their Parsha sheets, right? But the father gives the Dvar Torah in the end. It's supposed to, kids it's part of the chinuch process. But at the Haggadah, the Seder, it's like that's the whole thing. The Manishtan is the kids are the central focus over here, the entire thing. So, the truth is, you can really sum it up in the whole concept of Kiddush itself, really, in the end. The biggest problem the world has today is it's extremely profane. It's a very profane world. Just watch a movie from 35 years ago, 40 years ago. You can't really watch a movie today, not if you're from Jew, right? It's like even kids' movies today. I was shocked. I showed my kids a Disney movie, and it's like, they're obviously ready now for adults too. There's so much competition. The Disney movie in the beginning was for kids and very patient parents, right? Today, it's like there's nuances, and there's this, and there's that. It's like, it's not the same thing anymore. And how do I know? Because I travel on airplanes, and you can see the movies that are being shown, right? It's clear what's going on in the world. There's a big, and the language. And in the beginning, the language, okay, they began to allow into movies, but it was clear this is a movie with such language, and if you're like that kind of person, right, then you've got to watch that movie. But gradually, slowly, it made it into, and even today in the Dati world, some of the Haredi world, because the Haredi was more cut off. They don't hear these things. But in the Dati world, right, the swearing, the English swear words that have come in that you actually hear people using today as part of the language, and aside from the fact that most of the Hebrew words today we've abandoned the old Hebrew and taken on English words with Italian accents, aside from all that, but it's like, this is also a major part of that's why it's called Pesach, the mouth that spoke, and it's all about speech. Pesach is all about speech, the freedom of the Jewish mouth, because of the Jewish mouth is the indicator of where the Jewish brains hold in the end. But the Haggadah starts off, after we go through the idea of Seder, with Kiddush, because the fundamental difference between man and an animal, which is tied to everything else, which is tied to the Aleph, and the expanding of the Aleph, is a person's ability to be able to distinguish between Kodesh and Chol. In order to be able to be at Tzelem Elokim, to live as a Tzelem Elokim, to fulfill yourself, to be a link in the chain, to be able to be a shutav of the Kodesh Baruch Hu in the completion of Ma'aseh Bereshis, you have to be able to distinguish between Chol and Kodesh. That's all gone today. And it's an amazing thing. And you can just watch how in the frum world even, in the religious world, how much what used to be Kadosh is no longer so Kadosh anymore. And how much profanity, not just profanity in terms of language, but activities and attitudes and clothing, tznius, is less about covering up parts of the body as sanctifying things, as saying things are holy, as saying things are reserved and meshubata for higher purposes. That's what the real message, because ultimately speaking, as the Torah tells us, right, we to be Kadosh, right, Kadoshim to you, because Kadosh ani, I myself am Kadosh, and therefore what? There's no way in the world you'll ever be able to relate to me if you're not on the same level as I'm on. To whatever degree you could do that in your lifetime. The idea of making Kiddush to begin the Seder is a reminder, ultimately speaking, that the Jewish people are here to be mafra between Kodesh and Chol. But there's no way it's going to happen if you haven't first expanded the Aleph. And the Aleph only gets bigger when a person becomes increasingly more exposed to the reality of Kodesh Baruch Hu in everyday life. And that's what the Makkahs were all about. The Makkahs, each Makkah was for Klal Yisrael, even the 10th one, even though that was the one that freed the Jewish people, that was the Makkah Patish, literally the Makkah Patish, right? Every Makkah, right, was specifically to increase the ability of the Jewish people to see the revelation of the Kodesh Baruch Hu in everyday life. The whole point of the Haggadah, is basically like glasses. Just like Purim was glasses for Pesach, the Haggadah is what we put on in order to be able to see how Kodesh Baruch Hu is in the world at all times, at all levels, and to interact with that as if it's a reality. And the reason why we can say to the Rasha, had you been there, you wouldn't have gone out, because he's saying basically, and the only reason why he can say that, the reason why I can say, what does this avodah mean to you, is because he cannot see how the avodah is less to do about sacrificing an animal as much as it is for the sake of distinguishing between Kodesh and Chol, between holy and profane, and more importantly, connecting to Kodesh Baruch Hu so you can see Kodesh Baruch Hu in every aspect of life. Because that was the problem with the 4/5. In spite of the fact that the Kodesh Baruch Hu kept doing another makkah and another makkah and another makkah, and each makkah was an increased gilui of a Kodesh Baruch Hu's involvement in creation. It wasn't that he was becoming more involved in creation. Right? He wasn't becoming more, he was always just as involved in creation as he was during the Esther Makos. He was revealing how much he was involved. Almost Ke'ilah was like a curtain, right? The first Makkah, he was always there behind moving the levers, right? Like an Wizard of Oz, right? He was always moving the levers. That was a fraud. This is the real thing, right? But the first Makkah raised the curtain this high. So you saw his feet, Kiviyach, so to speak, right? And the second Makkah brought the curtain to his knees. So he saw his knees, Kiviyach, so to speak. And the third Makkah, got a little higher to the extreme. They said, well, that's already beyond, magic. It's no longer kishu. It has to be some kind of, godly being. And they had to say it. And they're saying it. It's remarkable. They're saying, the Egyptians themselves, Amem Tesh Shari Tuma, are saying it. What's with the 4/5? What's with the 4/5? Your enemies, the people who contradicted you, your whole existence, and they enslaved you because they didn't believe in other stuff, they're now coming back and saying, no, it's true. It has to be God. What's going on over here? They couldn't see it. The 5th plague, the 6th plague, 7th plague. Because Baruch Hu says that by the 8th plague, already like the curtain's up to here, and you're denying the reality of my involvement in everyday life on an ongoing basis, forget it. There's no 10th plague for you. Because in the 10th plague, the curtain goes all the way up. As much as it can in this world, all the way up. Malach, Machim, Amlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself does it. What about Smo? He does it. Ani v'lo malach. Ani v'lo serach. What do those words mean? So we understand those words to mean that HaKadosh Baruch Hu didn't have intermediaries, but did it make it not mean to us? No, because we could say that, no, not at all. It means the following thing. Why is the emphasis like this? To tell you, and by Makas Bechoros, the feeling of the presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu was so incredible, there was no Bechira that night. Do you understand what it means to have no Bechira? No, you don't. Because you've never had experience of no Bechira. You've never have a Gilu of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Maybe some miracles have happened in your life where it was like so crystal clear, but believe me, someone would come along and try and contradict things that might pull you down a bit. But that night, there was no denying the reality of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. By Makas Bechoros, there's no Bechir, so that's why by the 4/5 had to be taken up by Makas Choshech, because there was no Bechira. Them coming to believe in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that plague no longer counted anymore. That's what the Haggadah is about. The Seder itself, right? The whole concept of Seder, bringing Seder to the Olam, the result of Mem Tesh Shari Tuma, the result of living on the level of Daled Mem only. Just the Dam itself is Tohu, Mavohu, and Choshech, and Alpinei Tehom, the Tom itself. That's the result. Seder is what HaKadosh Baruch Hu, as a Elohim, brings to the world. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Mesader everything. Seder is light. It organizes things. With that light, you can see where things are and make connections, build relationships. In darkness, you bump into things. You can't feel the presence of other things. So Seder is what the Jewish people were taken on Mitzrayim to do. But you can only build Seder properly because the Germans were kings of Seder. They were Seder, to the nth degree in the end. But it was totally destructive because their priorities were all off. Their whole perspective of reality was off. The proper Seder only comes about because a person has the Aleph, the Daled, and the Mem. Hitler Yimach Shmo V'Zechro is an example in Paro, examples when you're completely obsessed with the Daled Mem. There's no Aleph whatsoever. The Jewish people, and other religions, for example, Christianity, emphasize the Aleph too much, not the Daled Mem, which is why the whole thing falls apart, becomes inconsistent in the end. The Jewish people are about going back to the balance of Adam Rishon, the Aleph, the Daled, and the Mem. And the Haggadah is there to restore that balance. Everything about the Haggadah is there to restore that balance. And the moment you do, and you end up with the Aleph, the Dalet, and the Mem, Memela, you're in Geula. Automatically. De facto. It's like waking up on an overseas flight, taking one of those pills. Once I next got an airplane, it was a remarkable thing. I was totally in awe, extremely jealous. He took one pill, and as the plane was taking off, he did not wake up again until the plane landed. Over here? Because I struggled with the whole flight just to avoid boredom, and he's like, over here? Wow, that was fast. It was 12 hours. What are you talking? The guy said 12, didn't go to the bathroom once, 12 hours, the entire thing. Mamela, must have been a camel, right? Mamela, you end up in Gula. And that's what the Haggadah is supposed to do, automatically. Okay.